to start. There you go, so timely. Okay, so seeing that it is 2 o'clock, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Concord Light Board for December 29th at 2 o'clock. I have a message in front of me, get rid of that. All right, so thank you all for joining on your holiday week. Everybody has the agenda for today, sort of a targeted focus for today, but just a reminder that our upcoming meeting, a regularly scheduled meeting, is January 12th. And then we have the meeting scheduled for the next 6 months from there on through July. I don't believe we have any minutes today, given the holiday. It's been pretty busy. In terms of chairs update, just a quick update. I don't know if I think many people did attend, but we did have the public hearing for the high school warrant article on the 16th. I thought it was a good meeting. Obviously, the solar, there was a lot of interest in solar on the school building, but I think those questions were answered as needed. And Dave, my only question on the solar was, did we put that other presentation out on the website? I didn't see it for the town meeting. Maybe we could just follow up on that.
Yeah, I think we still need to do that.
Yeah, and the board probably wants to get that if it's not there already. So
yeah.
Okay, so with that, I know we have a full agenda today, so I'm just gonna move right along in the agenda and ask Dave, you want to give your update? I know you've been busy.
Yeah, it'll be quick. Last week we sent out a press release. It's pretty exciting. E&E their bid was accepted in the Commonwealth Wind project. So that's the first in the nation for MLPs being included in offshore wind. So pretty exciting. There's 20 MLPs that are going to participate. So it's about half of the ones in Massachusetts.
Great.
Really excited about that. It's the location of the project is 22 miles south of Martha's Vineyard in the area that the federal government reserved for this. It's 1,232 megawatts in size, so it's a pretty significant size. That'll produce about 146,000 megawatt hours per year. Very, very excited about that. The only other thing is, as I sent you guys an email, we did have a broadband issue over the weekend. We had about 6 fibers eaten by rodents. We replaced a 72 strand fiber that we knew was eaten, and it got eaten that night. So the guys finished at 2:30 in the morning on Christmas, and later in the morning, problem existed again. So as they broke down the conduit, they found a bunch of these damaged fibers. And then last night, our ISP came in and replaced some equipment that was causing slowdown. So everything seems to be back up now, but we do have a lot of permanent repairs to do. So a lot of hours, but a lot of damage, unfortunately. And we'll be doing an after incident report coming up. So see that. That's it.
All right, well, thank you for that update. I don't know what we can do about those darn squirrels. Do you think that's a climate impact from that?
Yeah. Squirrels and rodents, they're the number 5, the 5th on the list for causing outages in the country.
Yeah.
We've had quite a few of them lately.
Yeah. Well,
a quick question. We're doing a lot of undergrounding when we can. Is this making us more susceptible to rodents and less susceptible to storm events with the resiliency? So
rodent damage like squirrels, they take out the overhead system more often than the underground.
Okay.
So, and they usually don't survive the electric scenario. But the underground system is susceptible to damage like this. And, it's happened. It seems to be happening more frequently lately. So we're looking at new solutions for plugging up the conduits so they can't get in.
Great.
Yeah, because if you don't mind, and really, I don't mean to second guess your operations, but it kind of sounded like as if the squirrel got back in, or maybe the squirrel never left. So, you know, I think part of the after action, let you guys sort this out instead of my trying to figure it out for you, because I'm not in a position to say, but it's like, is there any way to take a look at the procedures to make sure that that the rodents are actually out of the system before you actually try to repair it, and that they don't get back in? So anyway, that's just something I'd like to see addressed.
That's something that we do when we go through any of these processes, Gordon. So that will be looked at.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Dave. All right, so moving on our agenda, last month we had a discussion around our residential assistance rate, and we had a willingness for this group to have a rate hearing on a change to that rate. So I would like to entertain a motion to suspend a regular meeting and go into a rate hearing on that topic.
I move that we suspend I move that we suspend the regular meeting and enter a rate hearing.
Second.
There you go.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, Alice. We'll do a roll call. Gordon,
Yes.
Alice,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Pam. You're on mute.
Yes.
And Wendy agrees as well. So, all right, so we are now officially starting our rate hearing on the residential assistance rate plan. Dave, I know you had distributed some documentation around a proposed rate change. Do you want to introduce that, you or Laura?
Yeah, just one clarification.
Yep.
So in this rate hearing, we had planned on doing two rates. The
That's right.
business electric vehicle rate, we were planning on doing that as well. We haven't finished up that those details, so we're going to push that off. Our goal is to have it out in the first quarter, so we have time and we didn't want to rush it. So we're just going to do the residential assistance today.
Okay, all right, thank you for that clarification, because the agenda did say otherwise. So we'll stay focused on the residential assistance rate. So do we need to share a copy of what was distributed to the group in terms of the proposed rate change?
Yeah, we should put it up on the screen. Laura, do you want to share?
I can, just give me a second here.
And so while you're doing that, I think the discussion that we had at the last rate hearing was a recognition that in light of the rate increases that we voted in effective 1/1/22, there's a question and a concern that there ought to be some compensatory change in our residential assistance rate program for those customers who would be impacted by the rate change. So the proposal would be in keeping with those rate changes.
Okay, I'm just gonna, if I can share my screen, I'm gonna try to do
Sure.
that. No. I'm working on it, I'm sorry. Share screen, here we go. Okay, here, can everybody see this?
Yep.
This is a copy of our existing residential rate assistance rider. What happens is folks who qualify for this rate pursuant to a state of Massachusetts needs-based formula qualify to receive currently a 10-cent per kilowatt hour discount off of the prevailing R1 rate for the first 657 kilowatt hours of monthly usage. above 657, which is the median amount of usage on the Concord municipal system for residential customers, there's no discount. So if you think of our residential rates being roughly 16 to 17 cents, getting a 10-cent discount off of that 16 cents is a pretty significant chunk. It's, certainly more than half. But as Wendy pointed out, we are expecting to increase rates about 7%, 6 or 7% in 2022. And so the thought was that people wanted to consider increasing this discount from a flat 10 cents to 10.5 cents per kilowatt hour. And that's what you see redlined on this proposed rate tariff sheet, which would take effect January 1st, 2022.
Great, thank you, Laura, for the overview. So to members of the board, are there questions around this proposal? I know we discussed it last month, but want to take the opportunity for folks to ask questions. No?
Wait, so what would be the impact to revenues or to net revenue, how much would it cost?
It's a very, very small number, Gordon.
Okay.
Yeah, there's about 162 customers on this rate.
Okay. I don't know if I can see any other hands raised.
So at worst, it's going to be 10 cents times 657 per month. So that's maybe about, did I do the math right? About 10 cents.
Well, it's already 10 cents, Gordon. So the only change we're talking about is actually a half a cent. So if you were to multiply 162, and let's say they all got the full credit for 657, which isn't actually the case because not everybody uses that much, but just as a worst case scenario, if you take 162 times 657 times point,
Just over $500 a month.
yeah, it's about $6,000 a year.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so I'm hearing no concerns from a revenue side. And if I'm flipping down don't see hands raised from the board. So I will entertain questions from the audience as part of the hearing. I don't see any hands raised. Am I missing anything? No? Okay. So if there are no questions or concerns, or further discussion, then I would entertain a motion to close the rate hearing and return to our regular meeting.
I move to
I
close. Oh,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead, Alice.
I move that we close the rate hearing and return to open session.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
Diane, thank you very much. Okay, I take a roll call. Alice,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Gordon,
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
and Wendy's a yes as well. Okay, so thank you all for that. All right, so let me ask whether people are comfortable and are ready to take a vote on this potential rate, saying that there was limited discussion. Yes. Okay, entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt the changes to the residential assistance rate from a credit of 10 cents to a credit of 10.5 cents per kilowatt hour for the first 657 kilowatt hours.
Second.
That was effective 1/1/22, right, Brian?
Effective 1/1/22. That's what I missed. Thanks.
There, that's okay. All right. No additional discussion. All right, so let's take a roll call. Brian,
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
tricked you. Alice,
Yes.
Gordon.
Yes.
Okay, and Wendy's a yes. So, all right. Well, thank you all. That was the fastest rate hearing ever. So appreciate that. And I think that's a good change for those customers who are in need of that assistance. So thank you all. Good choice. All right, so with that, we'll move on to the 2022 operating forecast. All of you received an electronic copy of the budget materials, and I don't know if people picked up a hard copy. I know I did. But with that, Dave, who and how do you want to start this presentation? Is it mostly?
So Matt's going to do a presentation,
Okay.
high-level overview of what you have.
Okay.
You know, feel free to ask questions as he's going.
Okay. And as a reminder to the board, we typically have this presentation with an expectation that we would vote on this in our next meeting. I know last year we actually voted and approved it in the same meeting, but just want to set that expectation. Can go either way. All right, Matt, sounds like it's all yours.
Okay, good morning, or good afternoon, I should say. This is going to look a lot like last year. Please feel free to stop me if you have questions. You'll notice in the bottom left, like last year, there's a page reference that agrees with your booklet. And then, yeah, so feel free to stop me if you have questions. This slide is new this year. I've been promising some more visibility on compensation for CMLP. So this shows FTEs in total comp by kind of our divisions inside CMLP. At the top, you'll see FTEs, and the 2019 and 2021 FTEs are based on actual time worked. So if a person left, let's say in the middle of the year, they would be counted as a 50% FTE or 0.5 FTE. And then the 22 FTE is 44 total. That is if we are fully staffed. So we've got 2 line workers positions and 1 telecom tech that are unfilled at this point. Those are assumed in these numbers as filled. The most of these divisions are pretty consistent. You'll notice they just go up each year by approximately a raise, you know, a 2 to 3% raise amount. The 2 that are kind of stand out, I've got a little red box that I'll show you. Are the line crew and the telecom divisions. Going into 2021 for the line crew, we lost a few guys. That's why you see that dip there. Going into 2022, we're almost fully staffed. We've got 2 open positions left, which I think we are pretty confident will fill. And then we've also got a kind of those guys got a market adjustment bump, so their pay went up a little bit. And then the telecom division had a pretty good increase. That's due to having an additional telecom tech, and then we also have 2 network engineers compared to the prior year. So I will move on. This slide shows the total principal and interest for the electric department. The green area, as you probably remember from the prior year, is the AMI project. This is assuming that we are fully funding that project with debt, which we may not. We haven't decided that. I'll also point off that all of our current debt is slated to fall off here in 2027. So that'll be nice to have a lot of that off the plate. This here is our 5-year capital plan for the electric side. The only item on this page that we have is the subtrans station equipment. Over the 3 years shown, $100,000 each year is for testing of cables that run from the main station to the switching station. Some of the insulation on those wires may have been compromised and may need to be replaced, which will be an even more expensive project that we don't have shown here. The extra portion in 22 and 23 is for a SCADA project. It's going to involve a lot of equipment purchases, computer equipment. Then I'll go to the next page. So there'll be a lot of items here. The first one is the distribution station equipment. This also includes some SCADA costs, project costs. And then we're also planning to upgrade meters at the station on the distribution circuits. Underground conductors. We've talked about this in the past. Back in 2017, we put some conduit in the ground using underground funds. Those are currently not electrified. We're planning to fill those conduits with conductor and electrify them in the next few years. That totals about 1.9 million. And those projects include, or those areas include Belknap, Elsinore, and Emerson Field. And this project will also be funded by the underground fund. There's also about 75,000 in 2022 to finish up the Barkus Farm project. This is funded by depreciation funds. The next one, the big one you see is the meters. This is the AMI meter project. I think we all know about that. For street lighting, in 2024, we've got some conduit downtown, streetlight conduit downtown that is failing. So we're planning at some point in the near future to replace that conduit. That's what you see here. The next one is the general plant. We're planning on at some point replacing the roof on the admin building right above my head, which leaks quite a bit, so that'll be nice. And then transportation equipment. We've already got a bucket truck in the works. That's what is in 2022. We'll also replace a passenger vehicle this year. And then in 2023, we're planning to replace a digger derrick truck and a couple other passenger vehicles. Last item on here is laboratory equipment. We're planning to purchase blast blankets, insulation testing equipment, and troubleshooting equipment. I'll move on. Okay. This slide shows the change in value of our plant. You'll notice all the way to the left in 2017, there was a big increase, and that was what I referred to earlier for the underground project, was the big chunk of that. And then you'll see this year in 2022, we have some pretty significant purchases planned. This slide shows the O&M cost. Most of the categories remain pretty consistent. The big driver here is the administrative and general cost, which we'll see in just a second. Here's the first page of the O&M detail. Just a couple items I want to show here, significant items. Maintenance of overhead lines. In 2020, we had some kind of elevated storm activity, so we saw a pretty good increase there. And then 2021 kind of fell off, and that was mainly due to reduced staffing on the line crew. So our capacity to do some of these projects, maintenance projects, was not there. In 2022, we're kind of expecting more of a return to normal. Hopefully we don't have a lot of storm activity. And then the other one is tree trimming. We talk about quite a bit. In 2020, we trimmed half of the town. But since that project, the classification changed for tree trimming, and now we have to pay prevailing wages for the tree trimming workers. So the cost has gone up quite a bit. In 2022, we're planning to trim 1/3 of the town. So we've kind of reduced the scope of half the town, and the cost has still gone up. So I think we're going to plan on doing 1/3 every year, and then maybe take a 1 year off after the whole town's done.
Yeah, that was a cycle that we used to follow, is 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, then a year off, and then you go back into it. specifically because 80% of your growth happens in the first 2 years. So.
Okay.
All right, moving on. I don't have anything to really point out here. We'll cover the CARES, the energy management budget in more detail, which is made up of a couple of these numbers. And then here we see the admin and general costs that I referred to earlier. The two big pieces I'll go into. First one being the admin and general salaries. There was an increase in 2020, which, if you'll remember, we parked a lot of salary here from guys sitting at home that would have otherwise gone in other buckets. So that's why there's a increase in 2020 and then it falls off in 2021. The increase in 2022 is just for expected raises going in, I think based on town meeting. And then the other item here that you see a lot of change is the pension and benefits. In 2019, there was a big jump, and that was almost all due to the pension, which we had some GASB pronouncements that came out that went into effect that year that affected how we treated the pension. It dipped off a little in 2021, and I expect it's just going to, from here on out, for the foreseeable future, it should just kind of elevate slowly year over year.
And Matt, am I correct? Your OPEB is fully funded, right?
We're on the same basis as the town, and I think that if I remember correctly off the top of my head, our pension is pretty well funded. It's over 50%, and I think OPEB is somewhere like 40% funded. I could be wrong.
It's not fully funded. It's
not.
They're in pretty good shape, but it's not fully funded.
I know both plans are above average compared to other cities and towns across the country. So in some cases, significantly above. So moving on, here is the energy management forecast. We used to refer to it as CARES, but it's not just CARES anymore. There's a few items I'll point out here. The LED bulb program is being discontinued in 2022. We kind of felt that that's kind of reached, pretty much every bulb you can buy nowadays is LED, so it's kind of lost its importance. There's a pretty good increase in heat pump rebates in the 2022. We think that there's going to be, with the promotion and coaching, there's going to be more activity there, or elevated activity. And then last piece is you'll see the solar programs are kind of tailing off, and that's because the state program has gone away. All of the monies you see in the 2022 forecast are already committed to customers that are probably already have solar on their homes. They're just waiting for the rebates. And
Probably
then
just worth mentioning that there's a really good description of all the CARES programs in here around the energy management. People should look at it if they haven't already.
yeah, I think if I remember correctly, there's 3 or 4 pages of notes on each one of these programs that with a lot of detail. So for the public, that'll be on the website once we finalize the forecast.
Yep.
And then I'll turn it over to Laura real quick for a couple slides.
Thank you, Matt. This chart may be familiar to some or most of you. It's a little complicated, but it's got 2 different measurement axes on the left and the right. The one on the right is the number of degree days in a year, which is basically a measure of how either cold or hot it was. So the colder it was and the hotter it is, the higher the degree days. So if you see in a year like 2018 that had almost 6,400 degree days, the columns represent an approximation of the town's load. So you see when degree days are high, the load is also high. And then when degree days are low, like in 2020, you see that load was quite low as well. It's not a perfect correlation, but you certainly see there is a correlation. Interestingly, in 2021, although our numbers are still estimates at this point, because obviously we haven't finished the year, but we're estimating a total load of about 178,000 megawatt hours for the year. And the total degree days probably won't be much more than about 5,825, which isn't actually all that much more than 2020. And yet we saw higher load, or we think we will see higher load in 2021 than we did in 2020. I don't have a certain explanation for this. Possible reasons could be, a return to more business on-site practices in 2021 versus 2020. It could still be a function of people, working even more from home than they did in 2020, or it could be beneficial electrification. But we look at these things pretty closely, and I personally don't think there's enough statistical evidence yet of beneficial electrification that I want to say that that was the reason for the anomalous increase in 2021. So we're going to be somewhat conservative in 2022. We're going to forecast normal weather, which is about 6,112 degree days, and a total load of just under 176,000 megawatt hours. Hopefully we'll be wrong and it'll be more of a repeat of 2021. We don't know, but we felt this was a prudent forecast. Next slide.
Sorry, Laura.
Oh,
Quick
no,
question.
go ahead.
So the annual difference in load year over year really is about 8 megawatts. Am I reading that correct, or am I?
Between which year and which year, Brian?
It's like between 2020 and 2018, you've got 180,000 and 172,000, and that's an 8,000 difference. So it's 8,000 megawatt hours difference in sales.
Yep.
That's, never mind. I was off by a couple zeros.
Yeah.
It makes sense now.
Between friends, that's okay. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions on this slide?
Nope.
Okay, I guess
I'd just like to point out that there is also a really good narrative that goes along with this slide, as this whole section has a really good read for those who need it, like me.
No, I enjoy reading it every year, Alice.
Yeah.
Good refresher.
Really well done, explains it.
Well, thank you.
And
From all
this
of us.
is, and Dave, this is available on the website for customers if they should desire to get more detail.
It will be, yeah. We just have to redact some of the power supply stuff like we always do, but yeah, it'll be up.
Okay.
This next chart shows how much we've spent on energy and related services. You probably remember that we pay not only for raw energy, but we also have to pay for transmission to move energy from where it's produced to where we need it. We have to pay for something called capacity. We have some fixed costs. And since 2018, we've been purchasing renewable energy certificates to help offset the carbon emissions of those megawatt hours that have not yet been converted to bundled supply contracts that come from renewable or non-carbon emitting resources. And the story here is that you can see the most obvious thing is that how much we've been spending on RECs has increased from 3% of the total purchase power cost category in 2018 to 16% in 2021. And the cost of capacity, this is good news, has been going down. After hitting sort of a peak in 2017, where almost a third of what we were spending on energy was going to capacity, that figure is down to 16%, helping to offset what otherwise would have been rate increases because of our commitment to purchasing renewable energy. Energy costs have fluctuated, but are generally down a little bit since 2018. And the other numbers are largely unchanged. Transmission tends to go up a little bit every year. Any questions on this slide?
Laura, the fixed cost, is that what is it? It's the peaker plant in Braintree. Is that the 3%, or is that in the distribution?
So I believe it says so in the write-up, if you happen to have that handy, but the fixed costs includes fixed O&M from Watson, but not fixed capacity payments. The capacity payments go in capacity, but the fixed O&M costs go in fixed.
Okay, so
And
that
there are some other fixed costs that we experience that go in that fixed category, such as the RISE contract.
okay. Thank you.
Next slide.
Just a quick question. Would the transmission apply to locally generated electricity, like say in rooftop or utility scale solar within the town?
No, the costs that go into this bucket that in the green here, Gordon, are all from third-party providers of transmission service. The lion's share comes directly as an invoice from the independent system operator for our use of grid services. But we also do have some transmission expenses related to specific projects or regional projects that we've contributed toward, such as in Western Massachusetts, to increase west to east transmission and things of that nature. And also expenses to wheel power across the Eversource system, because we pay transmission to the ISO to get it to the point of connection between the grid and Eversource. And then we got to pay Eversource to move it from their interconnection with the grid over to us. So there are several costs included in that category.
Thank you.
Which are all in your write-up, Laura. So thank you for all those details.
Okay. This is an interesting slide. This shows the type of generation from which we're sourcing our energy. You can see in 2018, 75% came from what we're calling the market. That refers to any power we purchase that's not from a specific generating resource, that we know where it's coming from, like Rock's Wind or Granite Wind. It's either being purchased from the ISO through the clearinghouse, or it's been purchased contractually from third parties, which are not required to tell us where that power comes from. So that is decreased dramatically from 75% in 2018 down to an estimated 45% that we think will be the case for 2022. And replacing it are increasing amounts of wind. Wind's gone up from 8% in 2018 to an estimated 13% in 2022. Solar stayed about the same. Hydro has grown from 7% in 2018 to 13% in 2022. And we had the emergence of nuclear in our 2020 portfolio, starting off at 3% and growing to almost 21% in 2022. So this is delivery on our commitment to transition our power supply from an emitting portfolio to one that includes resources from non-carbon emitting generating resources. Any questions on this one?
It looks great. I know that in 2010, that used to be 79% market energy. It was mostly natural gas, but we've done good.
Good. Okay.
I would also agree with Brian about this, but I just want to acknowledge there are a number of our constituents, our customers, who disagree with our increased purchase of nuclear, and that will be something that we'll need to discuss as we go forward and entertain and hear the comments and concerns about increasing our nuclear reliance. I see it as part of our important part of our mix to be non-emitting by 2030.
and looking forward, we have a large commitment to nuclear. So, and it's not going to change because we've had those contracts in place. So we'll bet you Laura's going to get to that shortly.
I don't know. Tell me, Matt, what is the next slide? We might be transitioning back. So if anyone has
Right.
questions about nuclear, yeah, we're going to go to sales. No,
So I
but
guess-
Wendy's right. We had quite a few discussions
Mhm.
a while back when we were proposing these nuclear contracts about the role of nuclear in our portfolio. And at the time, the composition of the board was ultimately in favor of adding this to the resource mix, and not without some concerns. There certainly were folks who, disagreed with that, but that was what was decided. And so we have these contracts now. Some of them end in 2029, but let me see. I think I've
in
got-
page, yeah, no, and there's a great graphic in the presentation on page 43 that has all the composition going out to 2030. So people can look at it.
Yeah,
We've seen it
okay.
before, but just for the audience, they'll be able to view that separately as well.
Thank you, Wendy.
And to Alice's point, more of this is going to be presented in front of us, and you guys will have to have a discussion on it. I know some opportunities potentially coming up, so that can be rediscussed.
Yep. Okay, well, we going back to Matt, Laura?
Yep,
All
I
right.
think so.
Okay,
Unless there are more questions.
that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. So what Laura just presented was purchase power. Now we're moving over to the sales side. This graph shows the sales volume kilowatts per hour. What I want to point out, which will play into the next slide, is this 2021 amount is a little over 170 million kilowatts per hour, and the 22 amount is a little under 165 million. So about around a $5 million decrease, 5 kilowatts per hour decrease from into 2022. So we'll go to the details behind that, the sales numbers. So the reason I want to point that out is, if you see here on this total electric sales, we're projecting about a $1 million increase in sales, but that's on less less load than the prior year. So I just want to show you that our numbers do take into account the rate increase that was just approved plus the PCA. So it results in about $1 million with the reduced load. The other thing I want to point out here is at the very bottom, the provision for rate refund. We've been talking about it ad nauseum for a couple of years now. This number drastically swings the total revenue from 2020 to 21 by almost $3 million. So just bear that in mind when you're looking at the totals above. Are there any questions on sales?
Matt, I did have one. If you look at the municipal sales, the medium and large,
Uh-huh.
I think it's medium and large, it looked like some things sort of, maybe it was small and medium, things sort of flip-flopped a little bit. Like medium sales are going up, but the large is going down, or vice versa. I might have it flipped. It just, I just wondered if there was some classification changes there.
I'll take a look at that. I noticed that when I was completing the forecast. So I have to actually go in each month and pull the data out for all the municipal customers to get those amounts. And it could be a mix up, but I think it's just the way the data enters the chart. I'll take a look at that, and whatever the published version is, I'll make sure that that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Just a detailed question. The line that says meter charge, it does not have an account number referencing it. How is that squaring if it doesn't have a tracking account?
So the meter charge is include, as far as the general ledger is concerned, is included with the, and actually that was the next piece I was going to hit. I forgot I added that. Here's the meter charge. So this meter charge is the total of all meter charges for each one of the rate classes above up here. And I have to actually go in and pull that out because it's included, it's embedded in that total each month that hits the GL. So I go in and each month run a report that calculates that amount, and I pull it down for the forecast.
And so all of these accounts are less the meter charge within that class.
Correct. Good question.
It's a great question. Thank you.
This is the continuation of the revenue. I don't have anything to point out here besides I'm forecasting a bit of a increase in interest income. I mean, the expectation is interest rates are going to go up, but who knows? I'm sure some of the gallery has more knowledge of that than I do. Moving on, this graph shows the rate of return calculation, and I'll just skip right through it to the detail page. If you look over here on the right side, we're projecting about a percent rate of return for 2022 and about a 2% net profit margin.
Can I ask a kind of high level question? So in 2022, we saw a net income go negative. And we saw during the pandemic, customer habits change a lot. We also saw energy prices move. The return to normal in 2022, are we going to be seeing more like 2019, 2018, or is it the higher energy markets are going to stay with us? Or as mentioned earlier, we have less kilowatt hour sales, but we have to collect the same amount of revenue to cover costs. Is that affecting our fixed cost recovery? That's kind of my biggest concern, is that this top level. Did we set rates high enough to really collect for our needs with all these major factors impacting the net aspect?
I believe that the rate increases will put us on track to collect enough to pay for the power. The question is whether our rates were enough on the admin general side, the O&M side, to cover those costs. So that'll remain to be seen. If we do have another high load year, I think we'll be fine. Or it'll look a lot better than what you're seeing here. But we are forecasting kind of low conservative sales and load.
So if we have a low degree day year, we could be in trouble again. If we have a high degree day year, we should be fine.
I think so. Yeah.
Your question, Brian. Sorry.
I think it's also why we have to look at the financials throughout the year, and while we'll reassess the PCA charge in April as well as the RAC. So we have to keep staying on top of it and monitoring. So
what's going on in my head is about fixed cost recovery for fixed revenue decoupling and having weather be such a major effect on these numbers. So the higher meter charges make sense, but that's discussions to come.
So also in my mind, as we transition away from fossil fuels and move towards more large building electrification, like the middle school, how that impacts our sales numbers as we go forward.
As long as we continue to collect fixed costs through volumetric rates, which pretty much every utility in the country does. It's not like we're unique here. But as long as we continue to rely on volumetric sales to recover fixed costs, we are going to have this risk of low load years. And solar penetration will further load reduction, which will further deteriorate the financial situation without some sort of architectural change to how we collect for costs.
Okay. Moving on, that's the end of the electric side. Now we're going to move to telecom. This is the 5-year capital plan for the telecom division. A few things to point out here. First one is underground conduit and conductor. This project is kind of we're planning to deploy fiber to the business district. This will provide more potential customers, especially commercial customers. I believe that this was dependent, or we may get some infrastructure funding for this project, but I'm not, it's kind of still too early for that.
That's what the plan was.
From the ACA,
Yeah, from the infrastructure bill that just passed.
Okay.
And is this the 120,000 we talked about at a previous meeting? Or is this something?
No, that's the core, right? Is that what you're asking, Brian? That
This is
core
a separate
investment?
discussion?
Separate discussions. The numbers that Matt's showing here are to put the conduits in the business districts for fiber. The core upgrades are different numbers.
Okay, thank you.
And this will result in probably us ripping up sidewalks and stuff and putting in roads and putting laying conduit down. That project also kind of plays into the next two lines of distribution of services, ONTs. We will likely see a little bit of a bump in those areas if we do have potential more customers. The next item is computer equipment. We're planning on buying some server equipment and some equipment that's out in the field, replacement stuff. And then the last item is we're potentially buying a new boom truck with a splice lab inside of it.
Seems like you're going to need it.
Yeah. This slide shows the total principal and interest on our outstanding debt for telecom. I want to point out that the big orange chunk in the middle is now over with. We've paid that off. So moving ahead, our debt load is quite a bit lower. We also don't have any current plans for debt. So, I mean, that's kind of how we want to operate if we can. Obviously, if something comes up, we always have that option, but currently we don't want to put out any more debt.
Matt, does this include the funding or the loan, if you will, from the plant itself? That one that we had to formalize as a result of the audit?
No, it does not. This slide shows the O&M costs for the telecom side. And again, the big driver is the administrative and general costs, which we'll go over in a second. Here's the detail behind the O&M. Not much to show here. That we've talked about the bandwidth in the past. In 2020, we purchased a little bit of excess because of COVID, and those costs have remained kind of in that same ballpark. And then here is the administrative in general. The big ticket item here is the salaries. This increase is due to having 2 network engineers full-time in 2022. So that's really the big change there. And then moving on to telecom revenue, the red bar is residential, and the orange bar is commercial. At one point we had some municipal, you can't even see the municipal, but there's a small amount in there for that. And then here's the numbers behind it. The two big ones are residential and commercial. We're projecting a 12% increase in residential and a 5% in commercial. And then we're also projecting a pretty big increase in installation fees. This number represents a 350 installations, which is just under 30 installations a month. And that's based on our backlog, and it's kind of somewhat conservative based on the backlog and then the expected number of new customers requesting service. I think that the revenue isn't quite as high as the installation fees. The increase in the residential isn't as high because we always have turnover. So, but I think this is pretty good. Pretty attainable goal for the telecom installs next year.
So Matt, can you just clarify that again? You spoke about turnovers, because in other places we've talked about having sort of 30 to 45 per month installs. You're saying that because conceptually we lost some customers? I just want to clarify what that.
So, oh, go ahead.
So just Matt annualized that, right? But really don't do the installations over 12 months, more like 9.5 months. Numbers will be higher than what Matt said per month, but a couple months where we can't work because of the temperature.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. That's good clarification. Forgot.
And in our experience looking at total customers, the net increase each month is has been lower than what our install rate is. So that's kind of where I didn't want to, say we're going to do a huge increase in revenue for one, because we sometimes we lose customers, they move out and the next customer doesn't necessarily use town broadband. They use Comcast or whatever other server. And then we also don't get a great, if we install somebody in October, we're only getting 2 months of revenue out of them for that year. So you kind of got to factor that in as well.
Yep, makes sense.
Except that I think I saw in somewhere, I can't quite get to it quick enough on my screen. There was a projected 14% increase in telecom sales. And I didn't square with me with looking at the trend lines that 14% increase is realistic. And I don't know where it came from. If you can help me understand that.
I have to do the math, but I think the 14% was on total revenue is my guess. And I probably mislabeled it as sales. I think that was probably in the executive summary. So
the 14% increase you're saying is in total revenue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'd confirm that 1,423,000 times 1.14 gives you the 1618 number.
Okay.
Thank you. This slide shows the telecom net income. The green bar is total revenue, and the yellow bar is expense, and then the orange line is the net income amount. It dips down a little bit in 2022, but I think if we do the 350 installs or greater, I think we're going to be in a really good shape in future years. We'll spend a lot of money this year, but next year will be pretty good. So
the rate of return is still healthy. It looks like it's about 7%. It was like 13% and estimated for 21. So it's still healthy and certainly better than the overall on the electric, which was lower margin.
Yeah. Good. And then this is the last slide. It combines the net income for both companies. The gray is electric, blue is telecom, and then the orange line is combined net income. So any other questions?
So I don't, Matt, I might have smaller questions. I know I went through this and had some detailed questions, but they're not significant. I think you covered the big questions that I had around FTEs, et cetera. Actually, you know what, on telecom, I just did have one question. I think Brian started to ask it. So the core funding that we wanted for that, you know, the core infrastructure, that funding was in operating expenses. Is that correct on the telecom? I think that's where I saw it. So there's no.
I think that, and I have, sorry to give you guys whiplash, but I think that this computer equipment here is what is made up of that purchase. I don't know that for sure, but I believe that's what it is.
Okay.
That
When
is
I
what
read
it is.
this. Yeah, okay. Right, because I didn't see any potential new debt, so that's what I thought. Okay. All right. Great. Other members have additional questions? I know people got soft copies and sometimes hard to keep track of your notes relative when a presentation is going on. Other questions?
I have small questions, but I think what I'd like to do is, if you're okay with it, Matt, I'll give you a call when I get back. They're more understanding the layout and understanding some fine points that I don't think the whole team here has to listen to my questions.
Sure, absolutely.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I could add is, obviously you guys started to look at it. We just, you know, went through a high level presentation. If you have questions before the next meeting, we can certainly answer them for you so that you're ready to vote on this in January.
Yeah, thank you.
And Matt, I'll just say thank you again for a great presentation. It's well organized. I like the new FTE counts that were in there. And I find the format really helpful, the percent change, the raw numbers, the raw change. Definitely nice presentation, easy to follow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No
I was
issues.
going to say similar comments. The fact that the descriptions and the breakdown of what we're talking about within the document is very helpful.
Thank you.
So it seems like from the board perspective, if you've got questions, we should send them directly to Matt, and then, you know, we can plan to vote in January on the budget officially. That makes sense. People comfortable with that approach?
Yeah, just copy me if you email Matt, please.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thanks, Dave.
And if you have any suggestions for future years, please send that along too. I think I want to incorporate some sort of cash flow perspective next year. It'll be informative.
That's definitely helpful. Well, you got the FTEs from last year too, so appreciate that. Thank you. All right. So no questions. Are there any questions from the audience? Not seeing any hands raised. Oh, Gordon, sorry.
I didn't want to ask this earlier, but if you don't mind, Wendy, if I circle back to from the director's report, David, and I guess you too attended a Concord Middle School presentation where solar was discussed. And I just wanted to know if it looks like there's going to be a hit on revenue, basically due to rolling out a substantial rooftop system. Is that something that we need to keep an eye on, you know, from the perspective of the board, making sure that, you know, what we're doing works for everybody? And
I think, Gordon, there's two things. One is I'd like Dave to speak to the presentation that was made because the board didn't see it before necessarily it was made. And then I do, you know, for sure this board is going to have some more follow-up discussions on funding and implications. And I think Dave actually will speak to concerns relative to the rates and the design decisions that have yet to be determined. So let me stop there and let Dave speak to to that.
Yeah,
terms of-
so in terms of the project, it's, costs associated with it, with the array, the battery, and that's the next piece for us to actually dig into that. And, the board will be fully involved because it will have an implication on how we go about the project, whether it's a borrowing, how we fund it, and that's going to require light board approval. So you guys will be involved as we go, but we are in the early phases right now.
Does this look like basically a net metering kind of application, or is it going to be something more like the solar field at Grace or the landfill, which are really basically just assets of the light plant, whether they're leased or not, but they belong to us and they don't really impact any one particular ratepayer?
So those are good questions. They will, it could be a bit of both. We don't know yet.
Okay.
But, as it pertains to this budget, you don't see that in here because we're not there yet. Okay. That will be in future budgets. So.
Okay.
So I think Dave and I have talked about this before, that clearly we're waiting for the school project to get approved before we delve into some detailed design considerations and funding. But I think that's sort of the next step. We don't know until we get to that phase. I also just want to comment to the board that there were slides presented on the project, and there were some dollar amounts shared in that presentation that were not shared with this board necessarily the day of. So I do want the board to see those slides. So we'll get them posted. And Dave, I don't remember what they were off the top of my head, but I think the dollar amounts raised some new questions during the public hearing. So
yeah, we made some assumptions, and we looked up the cost per watt and made a calculation. Those numbers are fluid and change frequently. So how long they remain accurate remains to be seen. As we know, prices have been down on things. So we expect the same. But yes, I will share those with you.
Yeah.
You all.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear that when that there was a particular slide that was shown that had a very large dollar figure that has raised a lot of concern and conversation in town. And I think this board ought to, be involved with understanding even those rough calculations, because I personally was caught off guard by that particular slide and some of the comments that followed. So I think the board has a responsibility to understand as we go forward any of those calculations before they go public.
And I would agree, Alice. I think all the board members have the same opinion. So I'll ensure that happens going forward.
Thank you.
Okay, so I realize that it's 3:08 and Pamela Drake, you have your hand raised. So.
Thank you, Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green. Does the town, I like the question about who's going to own the middle school solar and battery backup array and all of that. It'll be the light plant, won't it? And I was wondering also, who owns the school buses, and particularly the electric buses, and the possibility for vehicle to grid balancing and backup networking capabilities that will be getting larger and larger as we switch from diesel to electric school buses, and the infrastructure that goes with that. Is it the school department that owns it, or is it CMLP?
It's the school department that owns the buses.
Okay, then don't we need, since the school department is also part of the town, and these things interact in a way that needs to be coordinated in order to benefit the town as a whole, and not just the school department or the CMLP, what is the method for doing that? And is anybody thinking about that?
Pam, I think as it relates to the school project, absolutely, it's being considered, and that Dave is involved as part of that process. So throughout the design phase going forward, there'll be close coordination. And I think for this board, what the rates are that are charged to the school is part of our discussion and our consideration, because as you've heard today, our profit margin is very low. It's very tight. So we need to be very mindful of the rates that we're charging and what the financing and the design is going to be for that future system.
Well, will you get to use the school buses to benefit the town and CMLP for the grid and all of that? And
Yeah.
would it be a benefit to have town meeting pass no more money for diesel buses, only electric buses?
Well, I think, those longer term infrastructure discussions are still a long way off at this point. So,
Okay, thank you.
all right. Mark, there you are. You moved. Do you have a question? Mark,
Hi, sure, thanks. Great presentation, thank you. As far as the telecom goes, I think it would be really useful to add the average monthly subscriptions, kind of in the same way that you're tracking degree days. It's a really useful metric for understanding the actual size of the business. I understand why. Typically what I did when I was forecasting it was whatever you plan for in growth in the year, you tend to sort of take that in half. So if you think there's going to be 350 new subscriptions across the year, the average is going to be 6 months of use. Also, I think, particularly in the phase that this business is in, understanding what the exit point of the year is, in other words, how many subscribers there are in December by customer classes is also really useful, because it lets you very directly look at, did the growth that was planned occur? So those would be, I think, really useful ways to track that. And I expect that the capital plan probably needs a little bit more fleshing out in the out years. The replacement cycle for things like the core probably is around 5 years. So if the expectation is the core will get upgraded in 22, it's probably also getting upgraded in 25. I mean, in 27, 5 years down the road or something like that. So a little bit more of a look at that. And I'm wondering, is there any provision for any kind of marketing expenses? I see that the uptick in expense ratio in effect is largely driven by the new network engineers and staff, and that's understandable, and that's why that shows up in the 22 budget. But I'm wondering whether there's any marketing expenses that are planned that would help to support the confidence level around the real increase in subscribers that we'd be looking at relative to the performance of the last couple of years. Thanks.
good questions, good feedback, Mark. Matt, do you know if there was any substantial increase in marketing expense in the operating line item for broadband?
No, we did not include any. We currently have no plan, but I think that's kind of a fluid situation. I think as soon as the need for that arises, we will be jumping on that, but we currently have no plan for marketing.
Marketing is more of a maybe 23 year, just because we have still a decent backlog and we have more people. We're getting about 20 to 30 requests a month for service. So we figured we'd get through 22 and then we'll probably be able to start looking at marketing.
And I understand you're resource constrained. You got a backlog that you're trying to work off, but there could be marketing opportunities even within those constraints. If you talk about moving people into higher tier services and so forth, that might still be considered worthy of consideration even at this early stage.
Considering. Thanks, Gordon. All right. I am not seeing any other hands raised or questions. Anything else the board wants to share? Gordon, any updates from the subcommittee or the committee on fiber?
I don't.
Fair. All right, well then, if we've gotten through our agenda, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
You, Alice? So moved. Okay, is there a second?
I second.
Alice and Pam, thank you. All right, we'll take a roll call. Pam,
Yes.
Alice,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Gordon?
Yes.
All right, Wendy's a yes. All right, well, thank you all for a great meeting, very helpful, and enjoy your new year. And we'll
Thank
see you
you.
next year.
Take
All right,
care,
thanks.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.